I'm going to hand over to Tom Davenport and Andrew Lavelle from Alvius. Just before I do that, we've kicked off our AI and technology quarterly topic. That's what our webinars, our meetings, papers we produce, all going to be around that topic. So we're kicking it off in the right way with Alvius, who some of you will know, some of you may not, are a VMS and ATS talent pooling tech platform. They are proudly not one of the big boys, shall we say, and proudly very much building the platform around clients' requirements in a very holistic way, and in doing so really changing the way, disrupting the way that VMS tools have traditionally been used and applied to customer requirements. I think it's fair to say. So as you can tell, I'm a pretty big cheerleader of theirs. So I'm going to hand over to Tom and Andrew for them to carry on doing the heavy lifting for today. So thanks, guys. I will now mute myself.
Thank you, Mel, and hello everybody. I hope you're well and slightly less wet than I am, having just been caught in the rain. Great to be back doing this session. And as with last time, I think the first thing to say is we'd like it, if possible, to be interactive. The basic thrust of what we're going to be doing is updating you. Since we did the last session, some things have happened in the world of AI which you might find interesting, relevant to you. And we're also going to be just taking you through a few slightly more advanced uses of well-known, publicly available, either cheap or free systems. So that is what our objective is. And the idea is that it should be genuinely relevant to your day-to-day work, not like this is interesting academically, or I'm especially interested in AI, therefore this is interesting more. This is universally relevant to all of you. So if we're saying anything that you think is profoundly not relevant, do stop us. And if there's anything you'd like in particular to talk about, also please stop us. But as with the last time, nothing has changed in terms of our expertise. Andrew is the actual expert on this subject. I'll be doing taking you through a few things afterwards, but we'll kick off with Andrew. So Andrew, over to you.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so I'm just going to start off by talking about a tool which genuinely didn't exist last time we spoke, whenever it was October, November. So this is called Google Gemini. So hopefully you can see this. So it's from Google. The sort of direction of travel with a lot of these the sort of world of AI has been ChatGPT sort of started off this sort of arms race, if you will, and all the big tech companies are now sort of muscling in, building their own models, releasing their own models. And Google, unsurprisingly, has released its own version of ChatGPT called Gemini. And one of the cool things about Gemini is that it integrates very deeply, as you might expect, with Google. So if you are a Google user, if you have Google Drive, if you have Gmail, Google Workspace, as many companies now do, you have access to sort of deeper integration. And I just want to show you what that looks like, basically. And in terms of the practicalities of this product, Gemini, it's available. It's similar to ChatGPT. You can get a basic version of it for free, so you can try it out. You just search Gemini into Google. You'll unsurprisingly find it at the top of Google. And then you can also pay for a paid version, which I think is about £20 a month, maybe. And this is the version I'm showing you. It's called Gemini Advanced, and it has a few more features. But you can kind of make do with the sort of basic version as well. So what I'm going to do is just do a couple of things. So first of all, I'm going to show you the sort of YouTube integration. Now, obviously, Google owns YouTube, so unsurprisingly, it's pretty good when it comes to YouTube. So I've got this video here, which I won't play because it's an hour long. It's called How to Speak. Now, you may come across videos on LinkedIn. People may send you videos. But you may not have time to actually, watch these videos. It's an hour long, So I get this, someone sends it, says, wow, this is a great video, really practical, really useful for our upcoming, away day or something like that. I say, okay, great. I'm going to take that URL and I'm going to pop it into Gemini. So I'm going to say at YouTube, and this is how you, the way that you enable these sort of integrations as you sort of at it. So a bit like on WhatsApp, if people, you at people. So you can see here when I click at, there's various different options. I've got Gmail, Google Docs, Drive, flights, hotels, maps, and YouTube. So I'll start off with the YouTube one. So at YouTube, I'll say provide a detailed outline of this video. And I'll just paste the URL in, click enter, and off it goes. So it's going onto YouTube. It is extracting the text from this video, and it's providing a summary for me. And there you go. And it's really helpful if you just want to get a sense of what this video is. There's so much good content on YouTube, loads of experts providing really great insights, but often they can be quite long, and often maybe they're a bit fluffy, and you actually just want to get to the heart of what's important, what matters. And this is just a really simple way that you can do that. And then I can say, okay, that's great, and I'll pick up on this. I'll have a little look. I'll say, okay, here are the key points. Communication skills, cycling, great, verbal punctuation, telling a story. Okay, telling stories. Let's focus on that. And I can say, okay, give me some other YouTube videos. At YouTube again. Give me some other YouTube videos which I can watch to learn more about the concept of telling stories in presentations. Right. So do that, and again it goes onto YouTube, and it's now going to come up with some other YouTube videos that I could watch. And again, I could do the whole process again, right? I could ask it to summarize these videos, I could ask it to collate it together, and so it's a really powerful way of accessing YouTube, which as I say, it contains some amazing content, and it's a really great way to sort of skim through all of that really quickly. So that's the YouTube integration. The second one I wanted to focus on before I pass over to Tom is Google Docs. Now, I have got as my example set of data, slightly funny from a business perspective, but it's actually my notes that I have from when I did my finals at university, so a long time ago. So I have these documents in my Google Drive. I have all sorts of things. I have it on medieval history, American history, a bunch of different things, basically all history notes within history. So this is my Google Drive. So this is what Google has got to work with. Now, obviously, in a sort of professional context, you would have, work documents, and you might have thousands of different work documents. So I hope you can see the sort of the practical implications of what I'm going to do. Obviously, just doesn't just apply to revising for exams. So if I do at Google Docs, and I'm going to ask it, what were some of the causes of the Great Depression? I studied a bit of American history, so I should have some notes on this. And so what it's going to do, it's going to go into my Google Drive, going to go into my Google Docs, and it's going to look for the answer, but just in my Google Drive. So here it is producing a summary, and you can see it's referencing these documents. So I've got a couple of different documents here. I've got this American people on the eve of the Great Depression, New Deal notes, various different things. So what's really cool about this is, if you just take a sort of generic ChatGPT prompt, it's going to take all the information that it knows, but you might have very specific information you want it to refer to, and this is a really great way of doing it. And so you can reference where it's got it from, you can check to make sure it's got it right. So it's a really good way of searching through all the information you may have on your Google Drive and making some sense of it. We'll do one more. So this is a different topic. What were some of the causes for the decline of the Frankish Empire? Frankish Empire being a sort of 9th century empire, sort of modern day France. I've got some notes on it again, and here we go. And we've got some information that it's pulling up here, and I can show more, and I can ask it some follow-up questions on that. So that's what I want to show on Gemini. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to pass back over to Tom to go into a few other tools.
Great, thank you. Now, let me do my screen share. Hopefully this will work. There we are. Right, do you have my ChatGPT tab?
Yep.
Excellent. And do you still have it now? Just checking that I can move between my tabs.
Yep, so that's it.
Yeah, great. Okay, so what I'm going to go into now is first of all, the concept of good and bad prompts in ChatGPT. And in addition to that, I think I'll be showing you another system which has emerged and I think is quite useful since the last presentation that we did. But ChatGPT, good and bad prompts. Some context for this, and a quick reminder about what ChatGPT is. It's the system from OpenAI. It's the kind of really famous one that people are talking about a lot. If you don't use it currently, if you don't know how to get to it, you just Google ChatGPT. It's the top one. I have an account, so I go in straight. But you if you don't have an account, you would be able to create one. There's a free version, which is ChatGPT 3. I'm here using ChatGPT 4, which is a paid version, which is about £15 a month. It's not expensive. And the advantage of GPT 4 is two things. One, it searches the internet, and two, so in other words, it's not a closed system. And two, you can drop PDFs into it, which is helpful. Although, as Andrew just demonstrated, with Gemini, dropping an individual PDF into ChatGPT 4 is very good, but dropping 35 PDFs is pretty painful. Whereas Gemini allows you to do it all from one Google Drive. So maybe if you've got multiple documents you're looking through, that's the better answer. Anyway, last time we went into ChatGPT, we did a few queries, wrote a few prompts being the question, the search query. So like in Google, if you say, should I give a dog an egg? That's a prompt. The prompt is the thing that you write at the bottom here that stimulates the output from the AI, the generative AI. We went through a few of those, but we didn't really get into the meat of a good prompt versus a bad prompt, or a good series of prompts versus a bad series of prompts. And I think it's becoming clearer and clearer, and this is the case, for me personally, but also having looked into this, that the utility of these platforms is very much a function of how skillfully they are used, how completely they are used. And I will show you an example of this. So say I'm interested in IR35. I'm new to the sector. I don't know much about IR35. And so I go to ChatGPT 4 and I type in, what is IR35 and how does it work? Right, so there is a very simple question. Now, what happens as a result is that a response is produced, and you can see it's being written here. Now, the truth is, I think a lot of people stop at this point. And they think, well, that's quite helpful, but to be honest, if I Google IR35, there's always some law firm that's written a helpful summary, which is no less or more specific or accurate than this. And this also is very general. This doesn't really relate to my specific question. And I kind of can't really be bothered to read through all of this, because look, quite a lot is being produced now, to get the precise answer that I want. And I think I'll just call up my lawyer anyway, or go to our legal department. That I think is happening quite a lot. That is where the concept of good and bad prompts comes in. So this prompt was fine. It gives me obviously some information, which is accurate and tells me about the concept of being inside IR35 or outside, and what my responsibilities are, etc., etc. But the real trick is to be very specific in your prompt. So instead of that prompt, what I could do is write this prompt. Let me just find it. I wrote it earlier. This is an example, and this is the sort of thing that you should be thinking of. Please produce around 400 words on IR35 with the following headings: background to and objectives of the legislation, application of the rules, implications of being inside, implications of being outside, and further points to note. So I put that prompt in, and I will get a much more structured, much shorter response, which of course follows the headings that I have set. So background to and objectives of the legislation, application of the rules is being written now, and then of course it will move on to implications of being inside and implications of being outside. There we are. So whenever you write a prompt, it's completely fine to start with something broad, but it's always worth being specific. And of course, compared with some prompts, what I wrote up there is actually quite general. I mean, we could go a lot more detail than that, and you could give the word count or an approximate word count for each section. You could ask it to specifically include commentary on one particular area of it or not, etc. So that's a good example of a good and a bad prompt, or a bad and a good prompt. Yes, Andrew.
Before we go, there's a question in the chat which I think probably we could just answer now.
Yes, let's go for it. Yeah.
Which I think probably pertains to the fact that we're asking it about IR35 and things like that. It comes from Sean, which says, "What's the cutoff date for the data for ChatGPT?" It's a good question.
Yes.
My understanding is that GPT-4's cutoff date is April 2023, so it is a little, sort of out of date by about a year in that sense. As you say though, Tom, you can refer to specific websites and specific sources, and then it will pull that in as part of its response. So if it's something that is like very sort of novel, or needs to be very up to date, you probably do want to just give it a couple of links to look at to form its answer, as opposed to just asking it for something that will take into account data that's up to about April 2023. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Sean. Good question, and a good thing to be aware of, definitely.
Yeah, very important.
Especially. Yeah, if you ask it a football result from the weekend, it's not going to know, basically.
Yeah. But in fact, it's also a very pertinent question, because I'm going to come on to that in a second, with respect to this other system. Anyway, so that is good and bad prompts, and just introducing really the idea of going deep with your prompts and not writing a query like you would in Google, taking time to write a more accurate query and more specific one. But of course, the other thing that ChatGPT can do, and lots of the other systems can do as well, is refine. So you say, okay, thanks. That's unnecessary, obviously, but I do it anyway. Please do that again, but with the following edits. 1. Remove further points to note section. 2. Let's say we will split the opening into an introduction at a high level and then the context. 3. Write it all in a very legalistic tone of voice. Okay, so 2 requests I've made. So say, for example, this is because I've got to send a summary to someone who I think will be impressed by a unnecessarily but very legalistic kind of term, legalistic tone of voice, and this is the structure that I think actually on reflection will work better. It is immediately working precisely to that structure. So as you can see, we've got the introduction as requested, and then the context and objectives as requested, application of the rules as it was before, but the text, of course, is going to be different. Let's just see how that changes. Determination of whether an individual falls outside inside or outside IR35 is crucial, whereas on this occasion, determining an individual's status relative to IR35 involves a nuanced assessment of their working relationship with the client. So you can see it's taken my request to write this in a very legalistic kind of way, and it's doing that. But it's got the same kind of sense as it had before. Implications, and then of course, as requested, it's removed the final section. So you can really do a lot of editing of your work, of your responses inside the system, and I think it's wise to always work on the basis that your first prompt should be as specific as it can be, but that before you get whatever output you're seeking, you would do several rounds of edits, amends before you take this out and put it into a Google Doc or Word doc or email where you do the final tweaks. You can do a lot of the changes inside the platform.
Yeah, I think to go back to a sort of analogy we used in our first session, this idea of infinite interns, I think it is that, right? It's like you've got an intern, you wouldn't necessarily say to them, great, job well done, thank you very much. You would say, actually, I've got some comments, I've got some feedback, go do another turn of it, another turn of the deck, another turn of the document or whatever, and you iterate, and then you get to a sort of finished product. I think it's important, as you say, Tom, that you don't necessarily just accept the first thing it spits out. It can go through several rounds of iterating, and it can iterate on its own work, which is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, the next topic I'm going to go into is GPTs, which is again an area that has really grown since our last presentation. The prediction that would happen has proven to be accurate, and let me explain what GPTs are. So if the left hand side of the screen here, we can see this button here, explore GPTs. Now GPTs are basically versions of the underlying system, which have been layered with a load of specific prompts or contextual information that mean that you don't have to write all of the prompt information that would be otherwise necessary. So, for example, let's have a look at some of these. These change every day, actually, these trending ones. So let's have a look at these. Consensus, your AI research assistant. Search 200 million academic papers from Consensus, get science-based answers and draft content. Okay, so clearly that one is using the AI, the OpenAI system. It's using that underlying technology, but it's using it to search specifically a resource of academic papers. And I would imagine that the prompts that are inbuilt to that application are asking the system to use particular academic kind of formats and academic approaches that ensure the outputs are suitable for researchers. Another one here that's really good is Write for Me. Write tailored, engaging content with a focus on quality, relevance, and precise word count. So remember in the last one where I asked ChatGPT to use a legalistic tone, it will be the case that Write for Me automatically has written into the kind of default prompt that the tone should be engaging and that the text should be high quality, and it should always be checked for the following, classic errors, so that we don't have to write that in. So there's a huge number of these GPTs, and you can have fun kind of searching through to find them. But the two that I thought were particularly good that I looked at yesterday were Write for Me and Logo Creator. So we'll just have a little look at those two, and they both come for free with ChatGPT 4. So Write for Me. So I think what I'm going to ask for here, and again, you could do this in ChatGPT, but within a specific GPT like this one here, it will likely be more better quality output, basically, because the entire sort of environment or context of prompts has been prepared for you already. So it gives me some examples, write me a 1,000-word analysis on the future of GPT, etc., etc. But I think what I'm going to say here is, please write a LinkedIn post for me with the following. Let's imagine that we've just produced a new bit of technology at Alvius, which is an IR35 determination engine, let's say. So, headline, we have produced at Alvius a new IR35 determination engine. This technology allows you to easily determine the IR35 status of your team. It is expected to save in-house teams up to, let's just make it up. This, by the way, we haven't produced this, so this is like, I can just make this kind of stuff up. 20 hours a week. And let's start with that and we'll refine from there. So it's now taking that prompt and it says, certainly. Exciting news from Alvius. We are thrilled to announce the launch of our latest innovation, a new IR35 determination engine. This cutting-edge technology is designed to revolutionize the way you determine the IR35 status of your team, making the process smoother, faster, and more efficient than ever before. And then a section on why it matters. Understanding the IR35 status is crucial for compliance and financial planning. I mean, that is true. And then it's added in some benefits, ease of use, time savings, with the point about 20 hours a week. And then a section here on looking ahead. At Alvius, we're committed to creating solutions that blah, blah, blah. So that's great. And say I look at that and I think that looks really good. And it's even got some hashtags at the bottom here. Tech news, compliance solutions, etc. So it's picked up that IR35 is obviously a compliance factor. So that's, that's a very, very, as they go, good start. I think it's fair to say that's almost certainly better than what ChatGPT 4 or certainly 3 would be able to produce. It's aware, for example, that these rockets emojis might be a good thing to have for a LinkedIn post. But let's just play with this. So let's say, thanks, please make it half the length, but twice as enthusiastic. So we're going to get it ridiculously enthusiastic. So let's see what it does with that. So we want it shorter, but more exciting, as it were. So we've got some, the rockets have been replaced with stars, and we've got big news at Alvius. Inserted things like unveil our game changer, a brand new IR35 determination engine, saving you up to 20 hours a week, and then why you'll love it. Simplicity, speed, massive time savings, etc. So that's a more kind of in your face kind of ad, shorter and more energetic in tone. But of course, you could make it less energetic. You could make it, all sorts, any kind of tone that you liked, and you could continue to refine that. So if you're doing, if you're using Gen AI to produce content like this, then I would recommend, instead of just going straight into ChatGPT, looking at something like Write For Me or another GPT that's been built on top of the platform to do that for you, and you'll get a higher quality faster. So, in fact, as you maybe, let me just try one more thing. Same again, but with loads of emojis. Emojis are quite hard to set up in LinkedIn, in fact, as you may be aware, the way that the configuration works. So this will save you a bit of time doing this kind of thing. Here we are. Absolutely loads of emojis being inserted. And they are largely relevant. A snail for time consuming, a hand for waving goodbye.
That's got to be too much.
Time saving, arguably too much. But there we are.
LinkedIn wouldn't accept it when you sent it to be loaded up. They kick it back out and say we can't have it. Too much.
There it is. So that's that. Another one. Just check the timing. 11:30. We're on track. This is good. A logo creator, which is another of the GPTs, which was in the trending list today, and it was in yesterday as well, which is why I plucked it out. It is what you expect it to be. Images are harder with AI, and I think they are more obviously flawed. So you have to sort of take this with a pinch of salt, and Andrew might explain later on why it is that they are the output is often less satisfactory than with text. But you'll see how that. Well, hopefully it will make some mistakes, and you'll see that in a second. But let's nonetheless give this a go. This is, as I say, it does what you imagine it might do. So let's create a new logo for AppsGo outsource with the tagline, the best outsourcing companies in the world. Right, so I've made that very simple prompt, and I've given it no context at all. But because this GPT specifically is a logo creator, I should say I could have asked ChatGPT 4 that exact same prompt. In fact, I may do it in a second, and it would have just created a logo for me straight up. But because this is a logo creator built on top of GPT 4, it's more specific. So it's asking me some questions. So would you like the logo to be A, vibrant, B, neutral, C, serious, or D, skip for? And I think, let's say, it should be vibrant, in the theme of excessive emojis and so on. Great choice. Vibrant logos really stand out. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you like the logo to be in terms of complexity? 1, extremely clean and simple, or 10, detailed and complex? I think, let's just say, slightly more complex than the default. At 4, it says there 3 is the default. So now it says, what about a combination of colors? What would you like? Blue and white, green and yellow, black and gold. Custom, let's go with custom, and let's say we would like green and blue. So there we are, green and blue it is. And would you like a single image or 9 different designs? And I think let's go for 9 different ones, just so we can have some choice in there. And I type 9 instead of B. Let's see if it understands that. I assume it does. It's creating the image now. And when Andrew goes into his session later, you will learn, if you don't know already, a bit more about what's actually happening at this point. There we are. Right. So we have 9 logos that have been produced. What do you think? Are you satisfied? Now, the first thing I was hoping would happen has happened, which is the challenge of text in imagery with generative AI. The best sourcing in the world, the best grr, unclear what that is. This one says outsource. This one says outsonce. This one says outsoons. Anyway, the point is, text in imagery is very, very tricky for this kind of technology.
Tom, you never picked up the one that says Ask Company.
Where's that?
That one there, the last one. No, it says Ask Company.
Oh yes, Askco. Yes, yes, yeah. Yeah, great. So there we are. That's a great. That's the most obvious error of them all, isn't it? And I can say, take. Let me show you another. Let's take the top middle one, but use red instead of green and simplify it. So there we are. There's a prompt. Now, of course, that when you do this with text, it works very well indeed. For imagery, I am expecting it to slightly struggle with that prompt, but let's see what comes out. It Okay, right. So again, it struggled with the text, and again, Andrew can go into that in due course. It had a mountain. It had the apps go in the middle, outsourced there, and text around it. It's done something completely different. Is the truth? It's got slightly better text at the bottom. Anyway, there we are. That demonstrates some of the limitations of imagery. Obviously, if you're going to go very, very simple and no words, then that will work a lot better. But even just with editing one image to another, whereas in text it's brilliant at that, it's kind of struggling here. So that's obviously an area it's going to go develop.
Yeah, I think probably the best area for this, if this is something, a sort of debate that you're sort of in, or even if it's something, say you're designing a PowerPoint slide or something, and you just want to, how should I structure this slide or something, I think giving you ideas, I think this idea that we touched on before, which was a sort of the blank canvas issue, right? You've got a blank piece of paper, you need to do something. There's so many times I've been putting a slide together and I think, okay, I have this text, I have this, I think it needs to be 4 things. I'm not quite sure what that should look like. I think using something like this to generate ideas into how you can structure things, where you don't necessarily care about the exact, image, you just want some ideas, I think it could be quite powerful. But I think, as Thomas demonstrated, it does struggle to do very specific things with images at this point in time for various reasons.
Okay, so before I hand back to Andrew, let me go to a different tab.
Tom, just before you do that, actually.
Yes. Sorry, yeah, go on.
What we have done, and what you can also do, is you can create your own GPTs. So you can basically pre-train your own GPT with a load of information, and then you can come back to it, and you can share that with colleagues and things like that. So we've created one, which is just called the Alvius GPT, and we've trained it with a load of information that we have, internal information, and it's then used by, in this case, our developers to use in their day-to-day work. But you could use it for your marketing team, your HR team, your ops team, whatever it might be, and you pre-train it with a load of information. And then, as Tom has said, you don't then have to then give it all this contextual information. It just knows it already. So it's like a sort of it stops being an intern, it starts becoming someone who's got a couple of years experience and knows the company a bit, which is also very useful.
That point about really comprehensive prompt / having the context stored up in the GPT
is very key.
Okay, hopefully you can see Perplexity on the screen now. Great. And again, just to follow my principles of this being I'm showing you this on the assumption you've not yet seen it. I'm just googling one. In fact, let me just Google it properly. There we are. Perplexity AI, Google, top result, Perplexity AI, straight in. I am logged in here. I've got an account, but it's totally free, this platform, you get straight to it from Google. So there's nothing complex about getting to this stage whatsoever. Now, what is Perplexity? Well, it's another system, but what this is really is Google on steroids. It's a mega powerful, mega specific search engine. And when you're running a search, like for example on legislation, because it is actually searching the internet, it may be a better option than ChatGPT, and it may also be a better option than Google. So if, for example, we return to our previous question about IR35, let me go and find what we had here. The initial query: what is IR35 and how does it work? I press search and I get an answer here. So this is like a combination of ChatGPT and Google. So you've got initially your sources, 1, 2, 3, 4 top sources are listed here. So you can click on them and view them in a separate tab if you'd like to. So that's the kind of Google element, bringing up the top results. And of course, Google also does, as I'm sure you've seen, pluck out kind of helpful answers, but doesn't do it as comprehensively as is done here. So we have the answer here at the top, and then we have context and more context, determining the status, etc. And as I say, this is going to be pulling from the internet. So is the latest information, and just like a really, really clever version of Google. If you want to just get to a website that fairly quickly, Google's obviously the answer. But if you want to ask more complex questions, Perplexity is probably your best bet. And then it's got follow-ups, and as with ChatGPT, a follow-up is always a great idea. So I could type my own, but it also recommends some ideas how to determine if you're caught by R35. Caught by is an interesting way of writing it. And so I can ask that follow-up question, and again, using sources that it's listed at the top, it defines the indicators, control, substitution, and so on, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. So there we are. I won't push this anymore, but I do recommend you go and have a look at Perplexity. It's a very, very nice system. It's very powerful, especially for this kind of question. Right.
Super.
Andrew, back to you.
Sean, I'll come back to your questions, both of them, I promise. The first one I'll try to integrate into what I'm about to say. I'm just going to try and do a very quick explanation as to how on earth this all works, basically, because I'm conscious that we want it to be very practical, but I also know that if you're anything like me, it helps to actually understand a little bit of how this actually works. Because when you're using something, you sort of need to know how it works to kind of fully grasp it. And we've done 2 of these now, and we've shown lots of hopefully practical tools and how you can use it. But what I'm going to try and do in about, well, probably about 10 minutes now, I go quite quickly, is explain what ChatGPT is, how it works, in a very basic sort of level. So I'm going to share my screen, and I am going to get started. Right. So hopefully you can see.
Yeah, that's good.
You can see my screen. You can see just the main slide, right? Yeah.
Yeah. How does it work? Yeah.
Just how does it work? Great. Okay. So how does it work? So what is ChatGPT doing? Well, you can probably sort of guess it, but what it's doing is what you might call reasonable continuation. It is producing a continuation of whatever text it's got, the prompt, as Tom has said, and then it's basically like, what would you expect to write next? And it's what would you expect to write next if you had access to everything that's been written, basically. So let's take an example. The cat sat on the, most people would say mat, right? That's because it's the most likely word to follow on from the phrase the cat sat on the. But of course, there are others. The cat sat on the windowsill, the chair, the roof, the counter, the floor. You could go on. So what ChatGPT is doing is assessing the probability of the next word or phrase that it can use. So it starts off, and when you see it typing, it's not typing, it is just looking word by word or phrase by phrase and thinking to itself, okay, what word or phrase do I use next? Right, what is the most likely word? So you might think, okay, well, that sounds quite easy. So all we have to do is figure out what the most likely word is or phrase to come next. And we've got ourselves a model. But the problem is let's say you've got, all the books that have been digitized. That's maybe 100 billion words. And then you've got another 100 billion words or a few hundred billion words from the internet, right? So that's your sort of, that's the text you can use to figure out, when the cat sat on the comes up, what is the next word or phrase, right? So that's your challenge. So you go, okay, that sounds good. I've got 100 billion words. That must be enough. Well, it turns out it's not enough, because if you look at just the pairings of 2 words, and you take all the combinations in the English language of 2 words with other pairings of 2 words, right? There's about 40,000 words in the English language commonly used. If you take pairings of 2 words, you get to 1.6 billion 2-word pairing combinations, right? That's already a heck of a lot of combinations for 2 words. If you take it to 3 words, you get to 16 trillion combinations, right? And if you take it to, say, 20 words, so that's like fragments of, a paragraph or an essay or whatever, still not that many words, 20 words. you're getting to the point where it's larger than the number of particles in the universe. So basically, you couldn't possibly write them all down, right? So the problem you come to is trying to figure out the most likely combination of words or phrases becomes infinitely large. And so you can't just take all of the text and figure out what the most likely next sentence or phrase is. You have to do something else. There has to be a better way of doing it. And this is the problem that has been solved by ChatGPT and other similar tools. And it's called a large language model. Right? This is what ChatGPT is, a large language model. You might hear it referenced LLMs. That is basically, that's what ChatGPT is. It's a large language model. So what is a large language model? So the core of what ChatGPT is doing is estimating probabilities for sequences of text, even though it's not seen it before. So it could never have seen the question you asked before, but it still knows how to answer it. It's not reliant on that question having ever been asked before. And you can get ChatGPT to invent new words, new worlds. It doesn't have to have seen it before. It's completely novel. So how does this work? How on earth does it manage to do this? Well, what it uses is what's called a neural network. Now, a neural network is roughly how we think at a very simplistic level our brain works. There are inputs and there are outputs, and there's something in the middle. Now, I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but a very simple example, which I think can kind of make sense of how this works, is let's say you were given the task of answering the question, will it rain today? Well, you have a series of inputs. You might go on BBC Weather. You might go on the Met Office. You might just look outside and see if it's raining at the moment. You might think to yourself, has it rained this week? You might look at the clouds. There's a whole load of different inputs, right? And what you do is you assign certain weightings to those inputs, right? Most people would probably, say, okay, I'm going to trust BBC News more than looking at the clouds in the sky. But if you're an expert on clouds in the sky, you might place more emphasis on that. Or it might be that you place very little emphasis on, I don't know, the view of your partner or your child, right? But these are all inputs. So what a neural network is doing is it's deciding which inputs to place more emphasis on and which to place less emphasis on. And it does this by training itself over billions and billions of inputs. So in our example of will it rain today, you'll make your decision and you'll decide which emphasis to put on what. And then you'll see if it rains. And if it does rain, you say, great, I got the answer right. I'm happy with, which things I'm placing the most emphasis on. And if I decide that I'm not happy with it, well, then I'm going to change my emphasis. Maybe I place too much emphasis on BBC Weather. Maybe I should place more emphasis on the Met Office or another weather source, right? So that's what a neural network is doing. It's basically taking inputs and it's deciding how much to focus on certain inputs and how much not to. And it does this over billions and billions of different neurons, as they're called, which is modeling a brain, and it comes to a conclusion, to an output. And these things have been around for a very long time, but the advent of cheaper and cheaper computers has meant that these are much easier to train and maintain. So that's a neural network, and that's really the heart of what ChatGPT is. But we have a problem. The problem is, how do you turn a word into a number? Because the neural network needs numbers. It can't just have words. Now, so what it does is it turns this word into a number. And you could do it in a very crude way, which is to just say, okay, I'm gonna assign a random number to the word cat and a random number to the word dog. But what that doesn't get at is how similar these words are. Cat and dog have a certain similarity in terms of language. Cat is more similar to dog than it is to car. So how do we express that? What we use is something called embeddings, which attempts to define a word's position in the sort of context of language. And let me show you what this looks like. So this is a sort of very simplified version of how this works. So what you can see here is lots of different words, and you can see some of them are closer together visually, and some of them are further apart. And this attempts to convey through its position in the space how similar or how far apart these words are. And what's interesting is you start to see nouns and verbs and adjectives clumped together, because as you train the system on it, it starts to understand that nouns are quite similar and verbs are quite similar, but certain verbs are more similar than others. And it starts to understand language and meaning. And it's amazing how this process works, and that as you start to turn words into numbers, and you do it in this way, you start to get a sense of meaning. And so the system doesn't need to understand language, it just needs to understand these numbers. And so these numbers are going into this neural network, and numbers are coming out the other side, but somehow it's being trained on so much data that it starts to get a sense of language, which is really quite amazing. So coming back to then, what is a GPT? Well, it stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. So generative is pretty easy. It's designed to produce some text, right? We've talked about that. That's what generative means, right? That's the G. The P and the T are pre-trained transformer. Pre-trained means that it's been trained on a whole load of data. That's what we've been talking about. All the books that have been digitized, all of the text on the internet, it's been trained on it. And transformer, we don't need to worry about now. It's basically just a type of neural network. So it's basically saying that a GPT is something that produces text using a neural network. So what that looks like is you have a prompt, you have an embedding, which we've talked about, right? Turning your text into numbers. And then you have this neural network, and it has this input, this embedding, it pulses through it, and then at the end of it, you get text. And that's it. That's really all it is. It's taking this prompt, turning it into some numbers, and then it does this calculation in the neural network. And there's 175 billion calculations that go on for ChatGPT every word or phrase it produces, right? So when it's producing text, it's doing 175 billion calculations every word or text it's producing. So Tom has done trillions of calculations just in the examples that he's shown you. So it's really extraordinary the amount of calculations it's doing. But what's even more extraordinary is that those calculations can result in language that we understand as being meaningful. So that's a very quick explanation as to what ChatGPT is doing. I just wanted to end on maybe a slightly more abstract conclusion, which is that in the past, we sort of thought that writing essays was quite difficult, that language was complicated, and we thought that maybe computers couldn't do it. But now we have ChatGPT. I think a lot of people have assumed that that's because computers have got a lot better. They've got a lot smarter and they're more powerful. But the answer is they haven't actually got more powerful. We've just figured out that maybe language isn't so complicated. And so I think the right conclusion to draw is that actually ChatGPT is showing us that language is actually easier than we thought. And that the slightly weird thing is we don't quite know why any of this works, but it does seem to draw us to the conclusion that language is slightly easier than we thought, and there are more patterns in it than we maybe expected. But that there is still some magic in ChatGPT that while I can try and explain to you how it works, we don't fundamentally understand why it works. I can tell you the mechanics of it, but no one quite knows why. So I hope that was interesting and hopefully vaguely useful. I'll just pause it there, and I'll just see if there's any questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen. And sorry that's so quick, but hopefully that gives you a very, very whistle-stop tour of it. I'll just go on to Sean's questions just because they've popped up. If anyone has any other questions, do pop them in the chat. Sean, it's interesting one that you drew out when you saw that it said Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs rather than His Majesty's Revenue and Customs in Tom's prompt. And the reason it did that, to go back to the explanation of how it works, is it's looking for the most likely series of words. And it will have been trained on, you think of, obviously the reign of of the late Elizabeth II was so long that it's assuming that when you're talking about, Majesty, it's Her Majesty rather than His Majesty. And it will probably take quite a while for it to actually realize that there is a new, there's a king on the throne and actually it's his rather than her. But that's quite interesting. And then the other one you mentioned, Claude 3. Claude 3, for those who don't know, is another GPT. It's produced by a company called Anthropic. Had a lot of investment from I think Amazon recently. And it has a series of different models: Opus, Sonnet, and Haiku. Haiku, my understanding is it's trying to be very quick in terms of responding, so it's trying to get very quick responses. So it's probably a slightly smaller model. Opus, by the name suggests, is the large model. Lots of companies are coming up with different size models, which can be useful in terms of cost, because if some people use this at scale, it can get quite expensive. But for the day-to-day user, I would typically recommend just using the most powerful one that you can get access to, basically. I think for the general user. Right. Sorry, I feel like I've spoken at a million miles an hour yet there, but hopefully that made some sense. Any other questions about anything that Tom or I spoke about before we finish?
Otherwise,
take a sip of water.
Mel, we are within your timing.
You are. I think Sean's got another question, but Sean, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick question. Can you explain to everybody what a token is? Because when we're probably talking to a lot of people here who may be budget holders, etc., who have to sign off on some of the uses of these. And you'll hear a lot of people talk about, well, the context window will take up so many tokens. And therefore that then goes back to the pricing structure that some of these large language model will produce. So can you just get people to comprehend what the token is?
Yeah, let me share my screen because it's the easiest way to show you. So just share this. Right. So this, you can search for ChatGPT tokenizer, and it's probably the easiest way to understand it. So if I search for the cat sat on the mat, you can see that this is 6 tokens. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So in this case, it's 6 words. But if I just paste, this text bit here, it's 682 characters, but it's turning it into 141 tokens. So it's sort of roughly per word, but it's not necessarily the case. So he says here, a helpful rule of thumb is that 1 token is roughly 4 characters of text. So what it will do is, for longer words, it will split it up, and you see we've got new, for example, is split up into 2 tokens. So you can approximate it through words and characters, but it's basically splitting words up as it sees fit. But when we talk about number of tokens and pricing, you typically have an input pricing for tokens and an output pricing for tokens. And one of the advantages of pre-training your models is that once you've pre-trained it, obviously the amount of input you have to put in is smaller, so it's cheaper. But yeah, that's roughly how it works in terms of tokens.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, guys. We're bang on time. So without further ado, I don't want us to lose all of our audience. If there's no other questions, I would just like to thank Tom and Andrew, as always. So informative. I can't believe, just in terms of the last time you presented your first session to now, you're already showing us new things. That's the pace of the advancement, and it's just mind-blowing how new things keep coming up all of the time. I think we all feel we need to get the basics right first, and obviously we've just got guidance on AI and using it in which our members can obtain from directly from us. So the guidance in using AI in recruitment, which is obviously very relevant for everybody on this call. So thank you both, really appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day, and good weekend when it arrives.
Thank you very much, Mel, and anyone who'd like to reach out, very happy to speak about this or VMS talent pooling type topics as and when.
Absolutely. And for those of you